the whole point of Guns N' Roses was they were this sex, drugs and rock and roll frenzy.
To me, they were the most celebrated and controversial and talked about rock and roll band since the Stones in the mid-60s. No one had come close to that sort of reputation, fame, infamy.
They managed to articulate a feeling around that time, a feeling of dissatisfaction. You know, I think it was subversive music, and, you know, they were a bunch of very self-destructive characters.
Everybody knew who this band were, and for them to deal with it was almost beyond belief. You can't deal with that. Great songs, controversy, rock and roll attitude, but there's an extra factor that drives a band to that level because you can't market it.
And they said to me, you want to hear the album then? And I went, well, obviously. And then you start hearing these songs and you're thinking, Christ. At this point, I started to realise that it was the greatest album I'd ever heard in my life.
The chemistry within that original lineup of Guns N' Roses is absolutely essential. It was primed to blow up in your face at any time. You never knew what was going to happen next.
And in the end, they imploded because of that. They couldn't hold it together because, you know, they were as dangerous as they made themselves out to be.
Guns N' Roses got together in 1985, and they were originally two bands on the LA scene who sort of came together. That was Hollywood Rose and LA Guns. Axl had been a member of both those bands, and Izzy Stradlin, his old friend, was also in Hollywood Rose with him. The lead guitarist, Tracii Guns, was in the band LA Guns, and he subsequently went on to rejoin them. That first lineup splintered when the band were offered some shows in Seattle, further up the West Coast. Tracii Guns and a couple of the other guys announced they weren't prepared to do that, so Axl had to hurriedly assemble a new lineup, and that's where Slash and Steven Adler came from. So they played those shows, and they cemented what we think of as the classic lineup at that point.
There was an explosive mix of Axl Rose's unpredictability, his manic depression, his charisma, his ability to go off at a tangent and really go off in a rage on stage, Slash's slightly more laid-back approach on guitar, and the way that Slash could almost cajole Axl back into line through the way that he played guitar and his own very easygoing personality. Then you add in Izzy, an old friend of Axl's, who understood what Axl was all about from the early days of almost teenage and childhood. And Izzy was the character in the band who was the gypsy. As far as he was concerned, Guns N' Roses was never about fame. It was about freedom.
You had Duff McKagan, who was very sort of chatty and sort of, you know, typical lanky bassist. And then you had Steven Adler. Steven was just like a bit of a dork. He could have been in Poison, couldn't he? He could have been in you know, any of those bands in LA, Faster Pussycat. The fact that he was Slash's schoolmate, obviously, you know, was good. But the thing about Steven Adler, the dorky though he was, my God, he was a great drummer.
Musically, the biggest elements of Guns N' Roses were obviously Slash and Axl Rose, but, you know, the other guys weren't just hired hands. You know, they made up. It was the perfect rock and roll gang. I see your sister in a Sunday dress. She doesn't read, she counts her best. She doesn't take no need to try.
Guns N' Roses were really a part of the hair metal scene, which was a lot of big bands for all trying to be the next Motley Crue. You have all of the band, Axl especially, were very teased up, girly hairsprayed hair and lipstick and everything. And I mean, certainly the first time I saw them, Axl was rocking the big hair look. So although they always professed to hate, I mean, a very famous quote from Slash right at the start saying that LA has a bad reputation, and it's bands like Poison that have ruined it for everybody else from LA. Well, that may be true, but Guns N' Roses didn't look significantly different to those bands right at the very, very start.
You know, this was the era of poodle perms and spandex. So at last you had a band who were properly dangerous. You know, they were actually real. They were a real bunch of rock and roll reprobates. And I would say their reputation preceded them, so that, you know, the whole of Los Angeles, everyone was talking about a band they hadn't even heard.
The first time I ever heard Guns N' Roses was via their demos in the summer of 1986, and the guy who'd just taken over as manager, Alan Niven, I knew through managing another band, Great White, and he said, I've just taken on this bunch, have a listen to their demos, see what you think. And I must admit, when I heard their demos, I thought, this is something special, this is quite good. And then they did some gigs at the Troubadour, which they actually cleverly recorded. Now, they were signed to Geffen at the time, but they were very much a street band. So Geffen came up with this current cunning concept of, why don't we record you live, put out these recordings, but not on Geffen. We'll come up with your own label, Uzi's Suicide. We're going to call this Live Like a Suicide, with lots of asterisks and stars, so it's got a bit of street level swearing about it. We'll put it out very low level, and we'll get a buzz going. And that's what they did.
Cover of Nice Boys, a cover of Knockin, the Aerosmith song, and two of their own original songs. This was a live cover, and it actually blew the original away. The singer was screaming as if he was on fire. So I later found out that it was Guns N' Roses, and this came from a 4-track live EP that they'd put out themselves called Live Like Suicide. Originally put out to sort of gauge interest in the band outside of their hometown of Los Angeles, and boy did it ever. That EP is worth a fortune now if you can find it.
It didn't fit into the comfortable pigeonhole of Metallica or Bon Jovi. This was different. And I think it immediately gave them a grassroots following in Europe and in the UK, which was to prove absolutely crucial.
Their whole strategy, very cleverly devised by the manager Alan Niven, was to break England and then go back to America as the hot band. And, you know, everybody has this idea that Guns N' Roses are a bunch of drunken, drug-crazed Neanderthals who were, you know, just rampaging around the globe. Well, yes, they were naughty boys, but my God, they knew what they were doing, because the other thing about it is you don't write songs as good as that if you're completely trolleyed all the time.
This band were a bunch of hedonistic, drug-taking, misogynistic bastards. You know, they were real bad boys. Now, they walked it like they talked it. So I think everyone in rock and roll wants to appear like they're dangerous, but I think Guns N' Roses were a real handful. You know, you would not want to take these boys home for tea.
Talking about the end of the 80s, Los Angeles, hedonism in excelsis. But Guns N' Roses, even so, went wild, even by the standards of the day. They were deprived kids who suddenly had the world at their feet. They were being treated like royalty, like sex gods, and they just absorbed as much of it as they could in as short a space of time as they could.
Alan never really believed in what G&R were or what G&R could be. And as soon as he signed them, I remember him saying to me, I think I've made the biggest mistake of my life. I don't actually understand what this band are about. They represent a different philosophy.
We sat there doing the interview, and Alan Niven sat in the corner of the room reading the LA Times. And any time I tried to talk about drugs to them and even broach that subject, you'd hear this rustling of the paper as if to say, just keep a lid on it, that's off limits. And it became this, you know, ridiculous scenario where I'd be saying, you know, what have you taken? They'd have to make some lame gag about, we'll take this, you know, chair out of the room or whatever, you know what I mean? It was just because the paper is rustling away. So it was quite bizarre, because the whole point of Guns N' Roses was they were this sex, drugs and rock and roll frenzy.
They actually injected some kind of proper excitement into music again. You know, these were very dull times for rock music.
Welcome to the Jungle opens Appetite for Destruction. I remember the first time I heard it. It stood apart because of that opening ominous crescendo. It was an anthem, but a very dark anthem. It was about going to the big city, as it were, and while other bands expressed it in a different way, in a very superficial way, Axl got to the root of the problem.
Welcome to the jungle. We got fun games. We got everything you want to have. We know when it's coming, people like to buy whatever you need. If you got the money, honey, we got your disease in the jungle. Welcome to the jungle. Once you bring it down.
You step off a bus from Indiana into Los Angeles and you're suddenly confronted by everything is here on the streets. You want drugs, you want girls, it's all here, boy. You just have to pay for it, and you're going to pay for it in a way you probably don't even appreciate or understand.
Axl himself has said that the lyrics came from a hitchhiking trip that he and a friend did in New York, when they were confronted by a homeless man who shouted at them, "Do you know where you are? You're in the jungle, baby, you're going to die." And that had such an effect on Axl. It was such a memorable moment that inspired the lyrics for Welcome to the Jungle.
There's a lot of bite in that song, a lot of punk, but a lot of metal anthem pretensions, as it were. And it was the first song a lot of people picked up on as far as G&R were concerned. As far as the die-hard audience, they quickly got, especially in the UK, when they played the marquee, that was the song everybody wanted to hear, because it was a chance to headbang, chance to wave a fist in the air, but also the lyrics made a lot of sense.
When you listen to a song like Welcome to the Jungle, which is a really hard-rocking, in-your-face song, there's that brilliant breakdown in the middle of it. It's really subtle, it's really melodic, and it's moments like that that made you realise what brilliant writers they were.
When you're high, you never wanna come down.
There are many, many moments, like, you know, right through that album, that are just genius little bits of songcraft, and that's something that often gets ignored.
I don't think there is a weak track on Appetite for Destruction. There are certainly moments that are more exciting than other moments on the album, but ultimately the whole thing is based around, the reputation of Appetite for Destruction is based around 3 songs. And again, for an album that is perceived as a end-to-end classic, that's quite rare, I think. But you know, the whole reputation of that record was based upon Sweet Child of Mine, Paradise City, and Welcome to the Jungle.
Their big album launch party for Appetite for Destruction was at the Whiskey A Go Go, the legendary rock club on the Sunset Strip, and I still hadn't heard the album then. I'm hearing songs like Paradise City, and when you're seeing a band live, it's not got that clarity. So I thought they were good and exciting, but I didn't think they were quite the band I thought they were the following day when I heard the album. And they said to me, you want to hear the album then? And I went, well, obviously. So they started playing it. And at this point, I started to realise that it was the greatest album I'd ever heard in my life up until that point. I mean, you know, you imagine you're 21 and you're on your first trip to LA, and then this band who you think, maybe they're good, maybe they're as good as people are saying they could be. And having seen them, I thought, yeah, they're pretty energetic, they're, you know, good live band. And then you start hearing these songs and you're thinking, Christ. And obviously that is an unbelievable song. And that was my eureka moment with them. I actually did say, well, you know, it just couldn't have been any better as far as I'm concerned. And I knew at that point this was a seriously brilliant band. They were so much better than the likes of Motley Crue. You know, Motley Crue have never made an album a tenth as good as that.
The famous refrain, "Take me down to the Paradise City, where the girls are pretty," it's supposed to reflect heroin abuse and getting high. The band Guns N' Roses was obviously based in Los Angeles, which was far from a paradise city at the time, so it's assumed they're being ironic. It certainly taps into that whole sex, drugs and rock and roll ethos, troubled souls trying to make ends meet in LA, the mean streets. But above all else, it's got a fantastic hook.
The chorus for it, about the dream of moving to LA, so and arguably the greatest chorus in the history of 80s rock. Guns N' Roses brought a real sense of reality back into rock music. They were writing about, you know, drugs from a fairly unglamorous standpoint. They were writing about being on welfare. They were, you know, it was all about, you know, dirty sex and getting screwed up on. When you think about they wrote a song Night Train about that really nasty fortified wine. That's the kind of thing that winos, tramps drink. Loaded like a freight train, you know, out of their heads on Night Train. That was the kind of cheap white trash that these people were. Brilliant. You know, I can't think of anything. I was 21 when that album came out, and I just could not have imagined that such a perfect rock record was going to come out, because it was perfect in its imperfection.
Everything Guns N' Roses did after Appetite Destruction had taken off, and bear in mind it took a year for it to take off in Britain, but everything they did became news. And, you know, that hadn't happened for a long time in music. The fact that, you know, Guns N' Roses coming to play gigs became an event.
We went to the Hell House, this place that's quite legendary in the story of Guns N' Roses, where they all lived together, and squalor was quite appalling. I do recall stepping around gingerly thinking, I'm going to step on a needle in a minute. It was that kind of grubby mattresses on the floor. It was deeply unpleasant.
You know, I mean, some of the stories I've read about them are unbelievable. you know. And I spent a fair bit of time with Slash, who lives exactly like that. He walks around in the top hat, you know, he really wears the same clothes for 3 weeks on end, and he drinks vodka all day. This is this guy's real life. This isn't a public perception of him. He really is like that. You know, he's not trying to impress you with his wild lifestyle. He really is like that. The album isn't called Appetite for Destruction for nothing. They almost set themselves up for a fall because there was such a big fuss about them that it was just like, you know, people were like, who do these guys think they are?
Appetite did take a long time to become the global phenomenon that you're talking about. Almost a year after Appetite was released, that it actually went to #1 on the Billboard chart in America, and in the week that it went to #1, I think it knocked Tracy Chapman's album off the top of the UK chart. A bit of a victory for us rockers there.
One of the songs on it that no one really picked up on was Sweet Child of Mine. Everyone raved about Welcome to the Jungle, Paradise City is tremendous, Rocket Queen, My Michelle, Mr. Brownstone, etc., etc., etc. But Sweet Child of Mine, to my recollection, somehow got missed.
The song was written almost as a joke. Slash came up with the famous intro, the famous riff, just messing around in the studio. He never intended to use those parts on the album, but Axl saw something in it and began to write some lyrics. Neither of them had any inkling this would be a groundbreaking moment for them. They actually saw it as being a standard filler just to complete the album at best. What it in fact did was open the doors and brought in millions of people. It propelled the album to multi-platinum heights, and they never really looked back.
Sweet Child of Mine has a certain soft centre, as it were, that I think mainstream media picked up on. And once mainstream media picked up on it, they went with it in the way that the Stones broke in the 60s.
It was quite something to hear a sort of a romantic ballad coming from a band who were best known for this unbridled kind of filth and fury. But it tapped into a lot of people that wouldn't normally hear the band. It ensured they got heavy rotation on MTV, they were on the radio all the time. Girls always like bad boys, so now they found a reason to like Axl, and of course guys naturally wanted to be like him.
It is a love song. It's about Axl and his on-off girlfriend Erin Everly, who is the daughter of one of the Everly brothers. I think it's Phil. And their relationship, as one might expect with anything surrounding Axl, very tempestuous. And what Axl is basically saying in the song is, I need you, but I don't know why. And I'm not sure what we're going to do. Where are we going to go from here? Where do we go? A lot of love songs in rock and roll are very certain. They give you a roadmap, as it were, as to where the relationship's going, who's in charge. That's not true with this song. It's very uncertain. No one knows what's going to happen when you take one step down the road. And I think that's part of its charm.
Some bands were trapped by having a power ballad. What Guns N' Roses had was a brilliant take on that. The kind of song that made everyone go out and buy Appetite. People that would have bought George Michael's Faith album in the same year, or in excess Kick, would go and buy Appetite on the strength of a song like that. I'm sure they were quite shocked when they bought it, because all it was a load of rocking and swearing and, you know, naughtiness.
To me, they were the most celebrated and controversial and talked about rock and roll band since the Stones in the mid-60s. And for them to deal with it was almost beyond belief. You can't deal with that.
They just all got gold Amex cards, and you could sense the machinery around them, you know, really clicking into gear. And there is a point when, you know, you're not going to be hanging around as much. And I suppose the most telling element of that was that Axl wasn't around until 2 hours before the show.
In terms of a good night out, you would never guarantee what you'd get with Guns N' Roses. I think they were a great live band as a band, but I think the unstable element was Axl Rose. So it all depended which Axl Rose showed up on the night.
Hey, take that, now get that guy and take that. I'll take it, goddammit.
They had that sort of edge of danger and uncertainty about them. You never quite knew what was going to happen at a Guns N' Roses show. Axl, being the difficult person that he is and was frequently getting troubled and irritated by, it could be people in the crowd, it could have been the security staff, it could have been his fellow bandmates.
Yes, Axl sometimes incited, shall we say, riots, because he'd get angry about someone with a camera in the audience, or someone saying something to him in the audience, but again, it was provocation.
Well, thanks to the lame-ass security, I'm going home.
In his eyes, he wasn't starting something, he was finishing something. And he did jump in the audience on occasions and punch somebody out who had a camera, which led to all sorts of problems. Axl was turning up later and later for gigs. That caused a problem. Axl was more and more removed from the rest of the band. That caused a problem. A lot of this could have been resolved with some common sense, but common sense and GNR weren't actually bedfellows at that point.
Geffen probably sensed that they weren't going to get any new material from Guns N' Roses for a very long time. So they were determined to put something out, and in the end they sort of cobbled together this album and forced it out.
So GNR Lies was a reissue of the Live Like a Suicide EP, which was a faked live EP that I kind of had played in the studio, but loose, in a kind of loose way, and then with some crowd noise from something else dubbed on. Oops. But it sounded great.
Shed a tear 'cause I'm missing you. Still alright to smile. Girl, I think about you every day now.
So what it was 4 truly fascinating songs they were brilliant. At that point, I really felt they were going to turn into the Rolling Stones, and they were doing everything I would dream that they might do after Appetite.
Sand woman, take it slow, and things will be just fine. All we need is just a little patience.
So what you get is Patience, which is an absolutely beautiful acoustic ballad, and the kind of song that you could play to anyone, and no wonder that was such a huge hit. And it was it's a truly brilliant song.
Sand woman, take the time because the lights are shining bright. You know that we could use a little patience.
So this was an amazing snapshot of a band. It was kind of like it was slightly on the run. They banged it out. They banged these recordings out. It's brilliant stuff. There's, you can hear guitar picks being dropped. You can, it's very, very intimate recordings. And I really wish that they kind of followed some of that up, and actually, because when you think how overblown they became with those Illusion albums, 2 double albums, massive production, kitchen sink production, well, I would say that they were better, arguably better, with those 4 tracks from GNR Lives, because they were brilliant. They were kind of rootsy rock and roll, and I thought that this band were going to be the new Rolling Stones, and well, it didn't really work out that way.
I can't think of another band with the imagination or stupidity, depending how you want to look at it, to say to their record label, we've just had the biggest album in the world. What we want to do for our follow-up is release 2 albums. No, 2 double albums, and we want to release them on the same day. So effectively what Guns N' Roses released were 4 albums. Use Your Illusion 1 was a double album, on vinyl that is. Use Your Illusion 2 was a double album on vinyl. No other band in history has ever done that.
Great idea, Axl. You know, it's a great idea for the accountants, but ultimately it put pay to their career.
Guns N' Roses first put together the tour for Use Your Illusion. They believed that the album, or albums, would be out. They booked the stadium tour of America, and they went out without the albums actually being out because it was behind schedule. Surprise, surprise. So GNR toured America with Skid Row supporting without an album. They were doing the biggest gigs in America, stadia across the entire continent, and selling them out. They didn't need an album. Strange. But what they were doing was they were introducing crowds to the record as if the album was out. So yes, Appetite was the core of the tour. However, there were a lot of songs put in from the Use Your Illusion albums as they were to be that gave fans an opportunity to hear what was going on. It was intriguing to hear the new songs in a live environment because they worked really well, and they chose the songs very carefully.
There were many good songs on those albums. The problem was it was just really too ambitious. But you had obviously November Rain, you had a great track called Right Next Door to Hell, which opened the album in magnificent, fiery style. You Could Be Mine was a great Guns N' Roses track, which featured on the soundtrack to the Terminator 2 movie. One of my favourites from those albums was Dust and Bones, which was actually fronted by Izzy Stradlin. He sang on that one. There was the bombastic epic Civil War, which had previously appeared on a Charity album, which the fans knew already. So they covered a lot of bases with those albums.
What we've got here is failure to communicate. Some men you just can't reach.
But Civil War, great song, and the sample from Cool Hand Luke at the start is great. Makes a really good answer phone message. And a song with whistling in it, which can only be a good thing. Civil War was heard quite a while in advance of the Illusion albums coming out, and it was a huge, huge step forward. I mean, its impact was just incredible, because the thing was, it had everything that was good about the excess of those albums to come. It was definitely a very, very different to Appetite, but in a very exciting way. No wonder people were getting so excited about the Illusion albums, because if that was this kind of flagship, it was a massive production, but a brilliant dynamic rock song. There's some great playing from Slash on there. It does have that terrible line in it, what's so civil about war anyway? And I did actually ask that to Slash only a few years ago. I did phrase the question exactly that way, and he said, "Don't be stupid, it's just rock and roll." And I
They were selling out stadiums for that tour, you know, all over the world. And they milked it. You know, they milked it.
Once the albums came out, of course, they continued touring, and the touring schedule just stretched into the distance, simply because the demand for the band live was enormous. You could say they spent too long on the road. You could say that, in a way, Guns N' Roses at that point were spending too long doing everything. And there was a lot of fractious momentum, shall we say. Things were starting to certainly fall apart. I saw them do certain things which were a bit ridiculous, and a lot of that was fueled by a desire for everything under the sun, be it alcohol, be it heroin, be it cocaine. Ultimately, it was to be a lot of their downfall, because they couldn't get out of that cycle that took them down into the pit.
You came in this world alone.
Axl himself was on drugs to actually alleviate and help him with medical condition, manic depression. Slash got into heroin later on and found it very difficult to get out, as did Izzy. Duff was very much into alcohol, but they all unfortunately did too many drugs. And it also led to eventually to the sacking of Steven Adler.
So nobody ever told you, baby, how it was gonna be. So what'll happen to you, baby? Guess we'll have to wait and see.
Where Guns N' Roses were going, Steven Adler couldn't go, for two reasons. One, he probably wasn't really the big showy rock drummer who could handle Led Zeppelin-esque epics that Guns were beginning to get into. You can't imagine Steven Adler playing all these little fills, and you know, maybe he just didn't have the power ultimately either. And the other reason Steven Adler couldn't follow is obviously because he had a major drug problem.
For me, as soon as the five guys started to fall apart, that was the moment GNR lost its magic. Steven went first, and Matt Sorum, who came in on drums, is a far better drummer, but he ain't Guns N' Roses drummer. Something went from Guns N' Roses, albeit not a great drummer, but someone who was part of the gang.
It dissipated the band, and I think they lost the real vibe, the essence of what Guns N' Roses were about. They lost something when he left. And suddenly they weren't this gang anymore. So I think everything kind of dissipated and went, you know, it became less exciting after he left the band.
Guns gigs changed radically. So yes, there were moments of lighter waving ballads, etc. If your singer's sitting down in the middle of the set, in a pair of little cycling shorts as well, man, he used to put his glasses on, didn't he, for his kind of, I'm John Lennon, everyone. I'm not sure about that. I think, you know, the thing about November Rain is Axl was talking about that years before, because they actually demoed it at the time of Appetite. There are demo recordings on bootleg, and it's quite an incredible performance that you can hear on those old demos. And it's no different apart from the completely, you know, throwing everything in production.
November Rain was epic, elaborate, beautiful 9-minute rock ballad, which I think does now rate as an all-time classic. It showed exactly how much Axl's vision for the band had changed. It illustrated the breadth of his ambition.
When I look into your eyes, I can see your love Estranged. Ooh, yeah. But darling, when I hold you, don't you know I feel the same? Ooh, yeah.
It was also the longest song ever to make the Billboard Top 20. It clocks in at nearly 9 minutes. And it was a genuinely beautiful, moving track. It wasn't just 9 minutes long for the sake of being 9 minutes long. It had all kinds of sort of interesting musical movements within it. It's equally famous, of course, for its legendary conceptual promo video in which Axl appears to wed his then-girlfriend Stephanie Seymour and is subsequently seen at her funeral. We're never quite sure how she dies. There's various theories behind that. And there's the very famous shot from a helicopter of Slash walking out of the church and reeling off the guitar solo. It's one of those sort of iconic moments in rock video history.
It's pretty tied up, isn't it? Once there was a rock and roll band, and time went on, and it became a joke. Oh, I mean, talk about deprecation, was it? Or were they talking about somebody else, or could they really see what they had turned into? Because, let's be honest, the Guns N' Roses that people loved on Appetite, you didn't want 4 backup singers and a horn section on stage, did you? So it rapidly got out of control. Axl sitting on a piano with a motorcycle-shaped piano seat, half a motorbike. Izzy didn't want to be part of a rock band that had turned into a circus act. Gives up the booze, he gives up the drugs. He's waking up at 7, 8 in the morning, going out on his mountain bike. You know, he's looking around, he's seeing the world that was a blur around them. The rest of them, you know, they don't even see anything apart from the hotel room and the gig.
He'd had enough. He'd had enough of Axl's tantrums, had enough of the lifestyle, had enough of everything that surrounded Guns N' Roses. He was never comfortable with being in a rock and roll band that big. For him, he's just happy doing what he does, which is packing a guitar, going out on the road, playing a few songs in clubs, going off travelling, coming back, doing it again and again. For him, the money that G&R generated gave him the freedom to do that. Suddenly being stuck on a tour bus or at a gig, waiting for Axl to turn up or not to turn up was irrelevant.
Izzy and Axl had been mates long before this craziness had even began. And Izzy was also a major contributor to the songwriting and to the overall Guns N' Roses sound. He was a quiet man, though. He didn't get much attention in the band, and that probably made most fans think that he was probably replaceable. And I don't think he actually was. You can see, actually, in retrospect, that since Izzy left Guns N' Roses, the remaining band have done pretty close to nothing since he departed.
So when Izzy left, Axl lost his confidant, grew deeper into his shell, surrounded himself with more people whose whole reason for being there was to blow up Axl's ego and make him Mr. Important. And it affected the whole chemistry of the band. The band weren't the same anymore. They weren't really a band, to be honest. And even when Izzy came back briefly, he said, I'm only coming back as a hard hand. You pay me this much a gig. I travel with my own coach. I turn up, I do the songs, I get on my coach, and I go away. I don't want to be part of this anymore. And to this day, he's remained apart. There have been rumours that he and Axl have been working together again on songs. Maybe, maybe not. At one point, he was certainly working with Slash and Duff and Matt and what had become Velvet Revolver. But as soon as it became a band that was going to have to record, going to have to tour and be tied to that sort of discipline, he said, nah, don't want to know.
Really, the moment Guns N' Roses ceased being a band was the night that Axl refused to go on stage until they had all signed a contract signing over their rights of the Guns N' Roses name to him exclusively. Whether that was the master plan or whether it just happened, but it meant that Axl could begin either firing people or forcing them to quit, in the case of someone like Slash, and Duff firing Matt.
You know, Slash didn't walk out for no reason. He walked out because the band had become a parody of themselves, and it wasn't true to the spirit of rock and roll anymore. I think Axl Rose is what went wrong with Guns N' Roses. You know, I think his ego just got so inflated that in the end it was like Axl and his backing band, and that was never the point in the group. You know, I think in the end Slash got bored of all the bullshit.
Unfortunately, after the whole Use Your Illusion tour finished, you're then talking about a Guns N' Roses lineup that is little more than a farcical revolving door of musicians. There's almost no point trying to keep track of it.
You have Axl, who is very much Guns N' Roses' leader, Guns N' Roses vocalist. No one else can do it. He has the name G&R, but who's he got in the band? Oh yeah, Dizzy Reed, who played keyboards a bit on stage with them. And who else? Yeah, good point. Who else is in that band? So no one really knows. Then you got Velvet Revolver with Slash, Duff and Matt Sorum, but they haven't got Axl. It's been a long time since Spaghetti Incident, their last all-new studio recording, albeit of covers. I still hope there is a legacy to come. The great lineup will get back together, with or without Steven, but certainly with Duff, Izzy and Slash and Axl. I'm sure it's going to happen 3 or 5 years down the line. But right now, Guns N' Roses' legacy lies in Appetite for Destruction. It lies in the enormous energy of that record, the inspiration of that record, the songs on that record, everything about one of the greatest pieces of music ever committed to vinyl.
Ultimately, you don't really need to know much about music to understand the innate appeal of an exciting, sexy, dangerous rock and roll band like Guns N' Roses.
I get up around 7, get out of bed around 9, and I don't worry about nothing, no, because it wasn't a waste of my time.
As a band, they appeal to a huge cross-section of people. You know, I know a lot of people who were pure hip-hoppers who loved Guns N' Roses.
They awakened a whole generation of rock fans in a very short period of time. They reawakened an interest in proper musicianship, proper rock and roll, proper live shows.
At the time, you've got to remember, although you had thrash happening, and you had, for want of a better description, big hair happening, this was rock and roll. This was like nothing else around at the time. It didn't fit into the comfortable pigeonhole of Metallica or Bon Jovi. This was different.
Whatever people say about what's happened to them since, it doesn't really matter. It's almost part of the magic, though. It's the madness of Axl Rose. It's the sheer lack of control. It's the ego, the drugs, the women, how they just completely live this unbelievable lifestyle. Images of them will always live in the memory. You know, Axl, just a total iconic frontman. Him and Slash being the great, like Jimmy Page and Robert Plant, like Mick and Keith, they were a great kind of foil for each other.
Ozzy Osbourne once described Guns N' Roses as being the new Rolling Stones. And to an extent, I think he was correct. It's probably more accurate to say that they were a part Stones, part Pistols for a new generation. Yes, they had the vibe and the atmosphere and the raunch of the Stones, but they did not have the longevity. They did have the aggression, the vitriol, and the short, bright lifespan of the Pistols. Not many bands can actually walk it like they talk it, quite genuinely. Guns N' Roses were a product of their times, and they were confined to that time. But what a product, and what an amazing time.
You know, Guns really, really brought the edge back into rock music when it really needed it. Not only did they do that, but the reason you'll have a classic album is if you've got classic songs. And there are so many on Appetite for Destruction.
Whatever they do in the future, and I hope there'll still be some great things to come, that is their legacy to the history of rock and roll. And there are very few bands of whatever stature who can actually lay claim to anything that comes close to the stature of that album.